I want to start first with the idea that we're in a place where God protects us. We're in a place where when things come at us, they will go around his people. And there are many prophetic words like this, but probably most dramatic are some of the miracles that have come out of the fires here in Eastern Washington. And I want you to take a moment. I want you to subscribe to Rumble. I want you to share this across the nation. I've got so many people emailing me and texting me about what's going on in Spokane, what's going on in Spokane. Send this out to them so they can hear what happened in Spokane, Washington, because it ties into this prophetic realization. So we have, and we're going to be posting this on Thursday, we have a picture quite literally of the wildfire going around somebody's property. Got another friend of mine, the fire came right up to his property line, did not touch any of his property. Had another friend of mine out in the Medical Lake area, all the homes around totally burned to the ground except his. And these are all tragedies. There's no question about it, but there are some miracles here as well that we do want to recognize. And so there's a twofold thing here. First, praising and thanking God for the miracles that did happen. And then secondly, praying for comfort and being the hands and feet of Jesus Christ as the church and helping those that are still in need. We just sent some things up to the CCOB church. Fantastic group of people up there. Pastor Jose doing a fantastic job. Brian Clare, the youth pastor there, doing a fantastic job. We sent some things up to help folks out there. And I suspect that over the next week, as people get a handle on what's missing and what all they've lost, that we're going to be praying into that. But I want you to hear this verse we've been speaking the whole year, every Patriot Radio broadcast. Zechariah 2:5, but I, declares the Lord, will be a wall of fire to her on all sides. I will be a wall of fire to her on all sides. I will be the glory in her midst. This, we didn't even know this, but Travis is going to put this scripture into the video as well, because this is just another confirmation of the prophetic word that happened and then was realized today, August 22nd. Once you remember that date, 2023. I'm going to read a couple things here, and I'm going to explain what's going on. I'm going to explain the 100-year prophecies that are being realized today, like this day. It's incredible. And we're going to talk about also some prophecies that were put out in 2015 by Chuck Pierce and then painted, or actually I should say put together as a picture by James Nesbitt. This is amazing. So here's the encouraging word for today. God is giving us all testimonies right now, the realization of God's word in our life. And in this, the spirit of prophecy, that is Jesus. So his words, when they're realized in our life, that is prophecy realized. And he's spoken many things over our lives in his word in the Bible, but also he has spoken those things to us in our quiet time with him in prayer. So this is what's so amazing in this time. And there's an admonishment that we're not supposed to be putting that lamp under a bushel basket. We're not supposed to be hiding our light. We're supposed to be speaking that testimony to everyone around us. And Isaiah Saldivar recently did a video admonishment on this exact fact that we're going to play here in a second that I really think captures this. When somebody else says it better than you, play that, right? But the fact is that the realization of God's word in each one of our lives is a testimony that we're supposed to speak in other people. And for some people, what's happened in your life and how God has brought you through trials, how God has healed you from wounds, how God has set you free from addiction, that might be the key to unlock somebody else's healing and deliverance and destiny.
How are you going to say I would die for Jesus if you don't even live for Jesus? You give TikTok 8 hours a day, you give Jesus 8 minutes a day. You are not going to die for Jesus. Let's just stop here. I would go across to the Sudan. I would go anywhere in Africa, anywhere in India. I would go to the Muslim countries and preach the gospel. No, you won't. You won't even share your faith with your neighbor, with the person at Starbucks. You won't even share your faith with your own family member you're with every day. Like, you're not going to Africa. You're not going to India to die for him. I know that sounds great. I would go with you. Jesus, I'll do anything for you. And Jesus is like, okay, how about praying for 10 minutes a day? Like, oh, I meant like, it's like we all think we're like super radical. I even think it myself. I'm like, man, I'm way less radical than I even think at times. I'm like, Lord, help me. Let's be honest. Like, are you who you say you are? It's like some of you are like, I'll die for Jesus, and then someone at church offends you and you backslide. I'm like, what? I thought you were going to die for Jesus. You told me you had a dream that you were on a cross for him.
On a cross for Jesus Christ, and yet not even willing to share our own testimonies. I hope this is an encouragement to you that wherever you go, wherever your testimony needs to be spoken, that you listen to that still small voice to share it with your friends, with your family, with your coworkers, whoever God puts on your heart, and that it is something that you come into a regular practice of doing. Now, this brings us to the prophetic word today. Again, we're going to have a video out later today. I wanted to make sure we got it out to a few of our own people first. It is just so amazing. So I'm going to back up. So there have been many prophetic words over the Northwest that there would be a fire that would start here, a holy fire, and it would break out to the rest of the world. And so most recently, a pastor from Kenya had this word. It was a holy fire that would start in Spokane and break out through the rest of the world. And it wasn't like there weren't going to be other fires in other places, but it was specific to Spokane. There was going to be a specific fire here that was going to break out across the world. And that what had been sown in Africa, the fire that had been sown in Africa through the word of God and through the missionaries that had gone to Africa and the crusades that happened there, was actually going to return to America. So a couple of weeks ago, Bishop Samuel was here from Kenya, and we had him here at On Fire Ministries, and there was a release of fire that happened through him. Again, holy fire that happened through him, where it was Kenya bringing the fire back to America. Okay, and this is where it gets so awesome. So this is the most recent word. There was also a word in 2015. Chuck Pierce gave a word that Washington was the whirlwind state, and there would be a release of the whirlwind of his glory in Washington state. James Nesbitt, who's an artist, a very prophetic artist, he's painted a lot of great pictures. Some of you may be familiar with his work. James Nesbitt painted this picture of Washington state. It showed puzzle pieces with the state kind of coming together. It had the Capitol in the bottom right-hand corner, and then it had a whirlwind, some might call a hurricane, over the state. All right, now, this morning, Dutch Sheets put out his daily Give Him 15. He's been doing this for a while. But today was special because Dutch Sheets said there were going to be 300 arrowheads put out through the United States, and he was going to start with 6 arrowheads. Now, I didn't watch the video. I still haven't watched the video. But I saw the title, and it resonated in my spirit about a prophetic act that had happened when I was in the legislature, and I want to share that with you now. Back in 2020, one of my intercessors, Elizabeth, she prayed for me almost every single day, and she felt led to do a prophetic act in the legislature. And here is what the prophetic act was. She was led to write down a prophecy and seal it in a letter that said, "Arrows of the Lord." And then she was led to take 5 arrows and put them inside of a rolled up poster of the Constitution of the United States. And then have another arrow outside of that. Now, the arrows that were put inside the Constitution of the United States were numbered by the number of times they were shot. They were shot 6 times. And then the one arrow outside of the Constitution was not shot. So as soon as I got this, I saw this come across, and I was like, this. The Lord just, I mean, it just resonated in me. It just exploded in me. He said really clearly, that get that feeling inside you. This is the day. Do you remember those arrows? Now I've had these arrows in my office for years. Since 2000. I've had them in my office. In the legislature, I had them in my office, and I had them here. Nobody really noticed them, and the letter was tucked behind these arrows. So I get a text message from our lead usher, John, and John says this. John says that his wife got something very, very strong this morning. And it says, quote, "The cool part is I felt strongly the same thing that his wife got." And here was the message from this family. "Hey, Pastor Matt, after listening to the Dutch Sheets shared this morning, what he had shared, I believe the Lord showed me that you will be a part of this arrowhead planting." And then he said, wanted me to hear him out. And he had mentioned to me, we were doing some gift assessments of kind of where we fit in the fivefold ministries a while back. Anyway, he saw kind of me being an eagle. So again, I didn't tell him anything. He had no idea the arrows are in my office. Nobody knew they were in there. Then our principal, Kebby, also contacted me and said, "Hey, Pastor Matt, I think this is for the ministry. I think this is for us and for you." And I said, you're going to be blown away by this because I've never told any of you guys this, but those arrows are in my office. So I have 6 arrows in my office. That sheet said 6 arrowheads. And again, I haven't watched this video. This is what people are telling me. So you got to understand all this is happening at the same time. We had these wildfires break out in Spokane. Miracles. Our youth pastor's property totally protected. Friends of ours' property, like there was over 12 families here just in on fire, totally protected. And that doesn't diminish the tragedy at all of the other folks that have lost everything, and we want to be there for them. We want to be the hands and feet of Jesus for them. But these wildfires break out, and then we've been praying, and then the rains came this morning, Tuesday morning, August 22nd, 2023. The rains came this morning. And lo and behold, the rains came from the remnants of a hurricane. So we sat down today and we opened this letter, and it's very clear the targets in Washington state that God wanted to take down, these strongholds, these evil strongholds of witchcraft and some other things that God wanted to take down. And then Cal Pierce prophesied, because we were all sitting here in the same room, Cal Pierce prophesied about these 5 arrows wrapped in the Constitution being the fivefold ministry of God, and this 6th arrow being the leader of the United States, who is going to return the civil government into alignment with God, and the church government of the fivefold ministry was also going to be a part of that. And I'm going to save the rest for the video so you can see it. So there's going to be an aligning happening. And this 6th arrow hasn't been shot. In other words, it's still yet to come. Whew. Now here it gets even more interesting. The date of this letter that had been sealed in the envelope, again, none of us knew this. There's no way we could know. So it was sealed in there. You could see me open it, and it's clearly very well sealed. It couldn't be reopened and sealed again. In this envelope is a letter dated February 22nd, 2020. So exactly 3.5 years later to the day. In a place where at the back of the sanctuary is this picture of James Nesbitt with the whirlwind, the hurricane over Washington State. And oh, by the way, the other place I saw that picture was in the legislature in Olympia. On the day, 3.5 years later, we open the envelope up. The prophetic word is realized. I believe this is the release, this whirlwind of glory, this stirring, upending of government here in Washington State. I believe this is the mark, the prophetic mark of the spread of the holy fire of God from Spokane, Washington. And all of you watching, all of you listening right now, if you've got a line to Dutch Sheets, make sure he gets a copy of this. We're trying to send him the video that goes into more detail. But I believe this is a prophetic realization of these words spoken throughout the last 100 years, 2015, 2020 in the legislature, by this Kenyan pastor. This is the realization of this, that this whirlwind, the remnants of it, the remnants of a hurricane, is the rain that put out the fire in Washington State. And oh, by the way, there's been some stirring here after the Sean Foyt event on Sunday evening. So that's the encouraging word. I want to take a little bit longer. Stay tuned for the video. We're going to get it out later today. God is on the move. And that brings us to your daily intelligence briefing. On the international front and from the globalists, we're going to go first to this by Gateway Pundit. The Great Reset report reveals globalist climate organization's goal to ban meat, dairy, and private vehicles in 14 U.S. cities by 2030. Look at how they're walking back. 2030 it was supposed to be for all of us, but now they were like, hey, we can only get 14 cities. So we need to keep doing what we're doing, keep fighting the fight at the local level. They're losing. This is another indicator they're losing because now it's down to 14 U.S. cities. That said, we need to be fighting in Austin, Boston, Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, Miami, New Orleans, New York, Philadelphia, Phoenix, Portland, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and Seattle, because they're going to try to ban meat, dairy, and private vehicles. Try to ban meat, man. Try to shut down barbecues in America. You thought Bud Light was catastrophic for that company. Try to shut down barbecues in America. That brings us to technocracy news, transitioning to a new global order. So this is this is a final push for them, I guess so, because it says now the same global cabal says that nation states are unable to cope with the interconnected global problems of their own. Hence, nobody except the United Nations can head a global governance. Well, I'm sorry, did you just say global governance? Yes, you did. So Antonio Gutierrez, by the way, who was the head of the Socialist International, who's now the head of the United Nations, says this, quote, "We are now at an inflection point. The post-Cold War period is over. A transition is underway to a new global order. A new global order." So right now, a new global order? Well, no thanks, Antonio. How about we do something different called freedom? Amen. All right, that brings us to China. In South America, now this is connected to China, there has been a 6-nation Central American parliament voted to expel Taiwan and replace it with China as the permanent observer of the group. They referenced the 1971 expulsion of Taiwan from the United Nations, saying this made Taiwan a province of mainland China. So you see these things aligning right now for China to invade Taiwan. Taiwan has been a permanent observer of Parlicen since 1999, and it's basically the 6-nation Central American Parliament. It's just one more thing China's trying to line up as justification to invade Taiwan. That brings us to North Korea. North Korea announced on Monday, open source intelligence, again, fantastic. You should all follow them. North Korea announced on Monday that they would be attempting their second satellite launch this year between August 24th and 31st, overlapping with U.S. and South Korean military exercises. Well, once again, a flashpoint or another potential flashpoint there in Asia. That brings us to South America, and Congresswoman AOC was part of a group of lawmakers, well, interesting, that went down to Central America and, well, and South America. Well, wait a minute. The delegation's trip to Chile was timed to mark the 50th anniversary of the 1973 coup that overthrew then-President Salvador Allende, the first socialist leader to be democratically elected in South America. And it's also interesting that the mutual efforts of these people, all right, and AOC specifically, was to meet with the Chilean president, spokesperson Gabriel Boric, and member of the Communist Party of Chile to discuss their mutual efforts to disclose similar information within each of their governments. Well, what is that information? Information related to that coup. So you had a meeting with communists in South America. You know, there's a reason that people called a particular local politician that is running Sandinista because of her visits with a communist regime years ago in Central America. So you see them just, they're so bold, they're doing it again. Well, this brings us next to the Middle East. Open source intelligence, in a follow-up to last week's story on a potential U.S.-Iran deal for exchange of U.S. detained citizens, Iranian assets frozen in South Korea have been transferred to a Swiss bank for exchange to Iran. So apparently the Biden administration is going through for this, billions of dollars. This is going to spark a war in the Middle East because now you're giving the mullahs the money to buy more weapons. This is just insane. It's just insane. And that brings us to Russia-Ukraine. Last week, Ukrainian media reported statements made by Yegor Chernev, the deputy chairman of a committee on national security, defense, and intelligence, that a Ukrainian mobilization is underway, adopting a four-wave approach. In other words, they're mobilizing more citizens. It does not look like this war is going to be over anytime soon unless there's something that dramatic that happens in the next few weeks. And again, we've been talking on Patriot Radio. Keep watching for the next few weeks to see what happens. On the other side, according to a report from the UK Ministry of Defense, indications suggest that Russia is highly likely in the process of forming the new 18th Combined Arms Army by consolidating units operating in Kherson and also by actively recruiting volunteers from the Russian Far East. So in other words, near Mongolia. So we're seeing this happen. All of this is indicative of something really big happening in the next little while. So talking like a year, next year, year and a half. But specifically, we're going to start seeing big indicators in the next few weeks. And this is where it gets weird. Masks are suddenly coming back. Talk of lockdowns is coming back. So we're going to hit this head on right now. Masks don't work. How can I say that? What qualifies me, Matt Shea, your humble radio show host here on Patriot Radio? What qualifies me to say that? Because I was trained in nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare as an NBC officer as an additional duty while I was in the infantry and in the cavalry. So, yes, I am qualified because I've been trained on this to talk about this. Cloth masks do not work. Here is a video depiction, and we're going to walk through this right now, of why they don't work. It is literally like a chain link fence trying to stop a mosquito to give you a visual. But here's an even better visual that Rob Schneider posted on Twitter here recently, coming to us from Socrates. Go ahead and roll the clip. Now what we see is 100 p.m., 25, 10, a red blood cell, E. coli, you see a bunch of viruses, bacteria, SARS-CoV-2 right there. It's one of the smaller ones, poliovirus and rhinovirus. You got a human hair, and then all of that all the way down. Now, why do I say this? Because when you get down to the viral level, the particles are too small to be stopped by a cloth mask that has gigantic gaps in it at the microscopic level. And so this just shows that masks can't stop viruses because they'll just pass right through. In fact, what they do is they actually collect bacteria on the inside of them, and that is where things can build up and actually become the problem. So, there you go. That brings us next to, on the national front, S&P Global cut its rating on 5 regional banks, explaining the sharp rise in interest rates and quantitative tightening are weighing on many U.S. banks' funding, liquidity, and spread outcomes. So you've got now more U.S. banks being downgraded. This looks again like they're trying to start a recession sometime in early 2024. All right, that brings us to WorldNet Daily. Mystery Jan 6 fence cutter, one of the nation's largest legal booby traps. The suspect removed barriers so Trump fans would unwittingly cross into a restricted zone. A new video that's been uncovered by Revolver News adds to the already significant evidence that there were federal agents at the January 6, 2021 protest turned riot at the U.S. Capitol, egging on the unhappy crowd, unquote. We need to find out who this fence cutter was, don't you think? Or maybe they already know. That brings us to the Western Journal. Biden insults Maui wildfire victims in desperate attempt to be relatable with exaggerated story about losing his home. Look at it. It's like they're setting this guy up to be removed at some point. I thought it was going to be earlier than this. I don't know. What I do know is right now is the time for prayer and unifying in prayer, which brings us to the local front. When there is a crisis, the Christian thing to do is to unite in prayer, pray over the folks that have lost everything, and pray over our leaders. Well, we had planned the Let Us Worship rally here in Spokane, Washington, months and months and months ago. And Sean Foyt had agreed to come on August 20th. So we had this all set up. And before the fires, we had invited Mayor Nadine Woodward on the platform there at the event so we could pray over her. And she accepted the invitation prior to the fires. So when the fires happen, naturally, we're going to pray over those people that are experiencing hardship, be the hands and feet of Jesus Christ and help people out, and pray over those people that have lost everything, pray comfort over it. Thank God for the miracles that did happen, and pray over our leaders in a crisis. And it wasn't just her. We brought several other leaders up on the platform, including one that just recently lost an election because they're leaders too. So we wanted to pray over everybody, an intentional thing that we do. So we prayed over them, we blessed them, asked for wisdom, which is what we should do as Christians. And by the way, we have done this in Kenya. We've prayed over leaders in Kenya on the ground and in several different cities. So this is not something that was just, out of character that we did a one-off. It's something we need to do as Christians. We need to vote our values. We need to vote our faith, but we have to be praying for our leaders. So I was a little shocked at the whole news story that came out and shocked by the response of the mayor. And many people have been asking me, well, how do you want to handle this, man? Well, look, I haven't said everything yet, but what I want to say right now is we just need to continue praying for the mayor. And clearly it looks like she has some bad advisors around her because all she really needed to say is, Lisa Brown, you're the one politicizing this event. This is clearly a worship event. No politics was even talked about other than praying for our leaders, which isn't politics. Praying for our leaders isn't a political thing. It's a biblical thing. So all that really should have been said is that Lisa Brown was trying to politicize this event. We had all come together. To pray for the community. What's wrong with that? And by the way, just because I disagree with you on something Doesn't mean we shouldn't come together and pray for the community. That's the biblical thing to do. That's what brings us together. But instead, Lisa Brown posted from what appears by all circumstances to be a self-proclaimed Antifa guy, and that's still being investigated. So she posts on this and politicizes something that was totally a worship event. It's been planned for months. Sean has traveled all over the country. So we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how God is moving because it's a distraction. There are people in our community right now who need prayer, who need help, and we're going to be there for them as the body of Jesus Christ. We're going to continue praying for the mayor. But the main point here is not to get distracted by Lisa Brown, not to get distracted by responses. It's to pray over the community and come together united under one banner, the banner of Jesus Christ, and help people and be the hands and feet of Jesus. I do want to say one other thing. The stuff that has been listed in the newspaper has been totally debunked multiple times. And oh, by the way, there's something coming out here very shortly that is going to put a little cherry on the top of everything and put this to bed once and for all. But the fact of the matter is, you need to ask yourself a question. Why did they attack me? Why did they attack President Trump so much? Could it be that we are a threat to this globalist cabal and their proxies at the local level, and these communists, jihadis who want to destroy the United States? Could that be the reason? And you need to ask yourself also, if that is true, and that is the reason they're doing this, which it is, how much more does God want us to focus on Him in this time so that He can release everything that He wants to over this nation and the restoration that He wants to release? Because the enemy of our souls, Satan, is raging right now because God is already on the move. And that is the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. Thank you to everybody that has been praying for us. Thank you for all the well wishes and all the blessings over the last few days. It's been incredible. Thank you to everybody that showed up at the Sean Foyt event. It was amazing, especially with a turnaround that fast to get an indoor venue because of the air quality outside. We had dozens of baptisms. We had many people rededicate their lives to Jesus Christ. We had people praying. We had people being set free. We saw people that were involved in gangs give their lives to Jesus and be baptized. People that had been struggling with addiction. And then we had that beautiful story about how the guy who stole Sean Foyt's guitar gave his life to Jesus. I mean, it was just an amazing night. So go back, listen to some of that event. I know it was live stream. And also listen to the first part of the show today. Subscribe to Rumble, like, and comment on this. But watch the first part of the show where I was talking about the prophetic realization that happened today. All the rest of this stuff, this drama going on, that's all distraction to what God is really doing here. And that is He is bringing Spokane and the Spokane region together. And He is uniting us to help each other in this time. Amen. So, again, take a moment, subscribe to Rumble, like, share, comment, and make sure your family members especially are being evangelized by you. All right, that brings us to a great guest. I love having him on every time. Selwyn Duke. He is a contributor to the New American, The Hill, Observer, The American Conservative, WorldNet Daily, and American Thinker, at Selwyn Duke on Twitter. It's always great to have you on Patriot Radio. How are you doing, my friend?
Not bad at all, Matt. How are you? Great to be with you.
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. You know, we've had a lot of things happening up here in Spokane in the last 3-4 days. Been incredible with the wildfires and everything. I wanted to just talk with you today a little bit about this kind of communist infiltration, right? So we get attacked for praying for a mayor at an event And really, the question should be, why weren't you there praying for us? I mean, that really should have been the question. There's been this slow roll indoctrination over all these years, and it seems like right now they're trying to run to the finish line. I'd like to get your take on that, and then we're going to play a video and get your reaction.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, we've had this Gramscian march through the institutions now for a very long time. And of course, I'm referring to that Italian Marxist, Antonio Gramsci. And what he prescribed was, he said, listen, why is it that Marxism has not prevailed in the West? And he said it's because the West's institutions are not conducive to the flowering of Marxism. Consequently, we're going to have to take them over by engaging in what he called a war of position. And that means putting people in positions of power in entertainment, in academia, so on and so forth, in the media. And I'm not saying that this was all orchestrated from above. What I'm saying is most of this was done, as Yuri Bezmenov, the defector, said, by Americans to Americans. But that's what's happened for decades now. We've had Marxist-leaning or hard left-leaning people infiltrating all our institutions and all our pseudo-elite halls of power, right?
Right. And this is the thing I think a lot of people think is maybe impossible, or maybe that couldn't happen, or somebody would have talked about it. Well, you guys have been talking about it at the New American for years. This has resulted in, as Yuri Bezmenov says, the demoralization, and in other words, taking the morals out, not just the common definition of demoralization, but taking the morals out of society. And that's why we're facing the transgender issues and everything else.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I always want to emphasize something. You know, for a morally sound people to corrupt or control a morally sound people, no conspiracy is sufficient. And to control a morally unsound, a corrupt people or decadent people, no conspiracy is necessary. That's what has to be understood. Remember, John Adams, our second president, said in 1798, Matt, you know what's coming. Our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Now, does that describe us today? Are we a moral and religious people with what we're subscribing to? So we have to understand that that ultimately is the fight, this demoralization. But what is the solution? I don't know if you and I have discussed this before. If so, stop me. But we always discuss the problem. I'm going to give you the solution. The solution Amen. To demoralization, in the sense that you defined it, is moralization. Now, how do you do this? Well, if morality came in a jar, Matt, what would be on the ingredients label would be the virtues. Okay, virtue is defined as that objectively good set of moral habits. So things like charity, chastity, courage, hope, love, diligence, so on and so forth. And once you understand this, things start to become clearer, because if you want to help a child or you want to help yourself to become a better tennis player, what do? You make sure you understand the principles of tennis and you inculcate them or cultivate them. It's the same thing here. If you want to become more moral as a society or an individual, or help your child, you have to understand the principles of morality, namely the virtues, and again, cultivate them or inculcate them.
So we cultivate them with the lemon test thrown out in the United States Supreme Court. I got to give a little bit of background for everybody listening and watching right now. So the lemon test was law for years. And I don't want to get into whether the Supreme Court can make law. That's what it was recognized. I don't think the Supreme Court can make law. Okay, we're not going to get there today. But the lemon test was enshrined as an opinion. And essentially it was government and religion can never mix. And it was almost as if that anybody involved in religious activities had the burden of proof to show why they should be able to engage in that religious activity. Well, the United States Supreme Court 13 months ago threw that out. And now what people don't realize is the law, legally, the Constitution says we can actually bring the 10 Commandments back into our classroom. Moralization. We can bring prayer back into our sports games. We can bring prayer back where it has been kicked out. But most people listening right now said, no way, Matt, there's no way. And I said, yeah, there is a way, and it's already been released. And by the way, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. Not Selwyn shall not do this. Not Matt shall not do this. Congress shall make no law.
Yeah, wow, you're stealing my thunder. I've been pointing that out for years. Of course, even if you believe in the theory of incorporation, which is just a legal theory and it applies the Bill of Rights to the states, how can you possibly think that it would apply to an amendment that specifically only constrains Congress? It's ridiculous. But the whole so-called separation of church and state, as you know, Matt, full well, is not in the Constitution at all. And that's because when the Constitution was crafted, that was a minority view at the time. You know where it is found? It's a constitutional principle in the Soviet Constitution, the one made in the 1930s. That's where you find the separation of church and state. That's a fact. You can look it up. And you have to remember here that when anyone says, by the way, that they believe in the separation, even so, Jefferson, when he propounded that idea, he was not prescribing a complete separation of religion from government. He was simply saying that as president, his rather unorthodox view of Christianity would not be imposed upon the people by the feds. It was really sort of a wall between the feds and the states. And understand this, it's so ridiculous to say that somehow the Constitution demands that we separate religion from government, because the founding fathers themselves opened the very first Congress in 1789 with exclusively Christian prayers. And they remained exclusively Christian for most of our history. And even today, they're mainly Christian. So how can anyone even claim that that idea is valid?
Well, and let's talk about this. So this letter from the Danbury Baptists, they initiated. So they wrote Jefferson the letter first, and then Jefferson responded. And he wanted to assure them that the government would not be involved in any affairs of the church. And yet, Selwyn, we saw it happen. You will shut down worship in Washington State. You will not worship, or worse, you will worship with a mask on, right? I mean, how does that happen, right? I mean, how does that even function? And that's how it's been turned upside down now. So as you talked about moralization, let's talk about more solutions. Bringing God back into the areas that he has been kicked out. That is one clear solution. And yes, we can do that. Let's talk some more solutions as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely. When I was talking before about virtue, I want to make crystal clear that virtues are different from values. Values is a term of secularism. It's sort of the atheistic speaking or literary style. Values can be positive or negative. Winston Churchill had values, but so did Adolf Hitler. Virtues are little snippets or reflections of truth, you might say. They come from God. And when I'm saying that we have to cultivate virtue, understand we need the grace of God to do that. You don't overcome sin, really, without the grace of God. So that's absolutely necessary. And something else I want to mention, because it's even more fundamental, moral relativism has absolutely swept our civilization. I often cite this, I know, but in 2002, the Barna Research Group did a study, and they found that back then, only 6% of teens, who are now adults, of course, believed in absolute truth. Rest of them, they believe that what we call morality is relative, and the main way in which they made so-called moral decisions was via emotion. Okay, now get this. The percentage among born-again teens, born-again, quote-unquote, who believed in absolute truth was 9%. 9%, wow. Matt. That means that they have completely missed the point of the faith, because not only is Jesus's message that there is truth, but he says he is the truth. He said that, right? So we have to understand that this relativism must be purged from our society, because it is the most destructive force imaginable. I call it the big lie. Why? Because if you can spread the idea that everything is relative and hence morality doesn't really exist, then you've set the stage for great evil to occur, because then people can justify anything they may want to do. Rape, kill, steal. Why not? Oppress people through government? Who's to say it's wrong? And I know I'm going on very long, but it strikes at the very heart of Christianity. This is the last thing I'll say about it. A lot of people, I've read article after article, Matt, over the last decade or so, about how evangelical youth are leaving the church. People ask, why is this happening? There are many reasons, I know, but one of them is relativism. Why? Well, it strikes at the very heart of Christianity, because why did Jesus come? He came to free us from our sins, to die for our sins. But if everything's relative, then there are no sins. There are only perspectives. There are only preferences. And then there was no reason for Jesus to die on the cross. So it renders that act absolutely incomprehensible. And that is why relativism is such a factor. And that is why it must be purged from our society. I guarantee you this. If we could somehow eliminate relativism as a force in the West today, what we call leftism would go right out the window. Because leftism cannot exist and prevail in a universe in which truth is recognized, upheld, and actuated.
You know, this is a fairly easy point to debate and win. And not that we're into winning debates, but the fact is that the existence of truth proves the existence of God. And when people say, well, I don't believe in absolute truth, well, really? Do you drive a car? Do you fly in an airplane? I mean, I want my engineers to be militant about the truth in how they put that car together, right? And so this idea of no absolute truth, well, then that begs the question is, are there values? As you said, are there virtues? How do we define this? Because we can say we vote our faith, we vote our values, but what does that actually mean? And if we don't define it, this is what happens with some college students that fall prey to communism. Go ahead and roll the video.
Education. Distract them from learning something which is constructive, pragmatic, efficient. Teach them natural food, home economy, your sexuality, anything, as long as it takes you away. Okay?
In your opinion, is socialism a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, I think people kind of throw that word around to try to scare you, but if helping people is socialism, then I'm for it.
It could really benefit our country in the future.
I think it's a good idea.
Socialism as a concept, as a philosophy is good. I think that it's got a bad rep.
And that's just the start, right? But Yuri Bezmenov brought it up. He listed what they wanted to undermine.
Yeah, he certainly did. He was a great man. It's too bad that he's not still with us, but there's no doubt about it. I mean, I've written a lot about socialism. Earlier this year, I wrote an essay, Was Jesus a Socialist? And of course, the answer is no. That's the short answer, but I hope it was an interesting essay. And these people talk about how the phrase, or the term, I should say, socialism is bandied about as if it's a bad thing. But I guarantee you, most or all of those young people couldn't even define it. They couldn't define socialism. And understand that Vladimir Lenin himself said that socialism was simply an intermediate phase on the way to communism. And understand this, what communism really is under Marxist theory. It is the stage at which government has melted away and everyone will supposedly then just be living in a state of harmony and economic bliss because there will be complete equality and there will be no reason for people to fight with each other or yearn or compete. And of course, it reflects a complete misunderstanding of human nature. It's ridiculous. But that's what communism is. So in essence, there's no such thing as a communist government. Any government that's trying to implement this plan is actually a socialist government. The Soviet Union was the USSR. It was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And socialism is, as you know, a very destructive force that has failed every single time it's been tried. I mean, in the early 1900s, Matt, around 1830, actually 1826, I think it was, we had a Scottish, quote, reformer, Robert Owen, come here and start a socialist commune. He was inspired maybe by the many Christian communes that existed at the time. And many of those Christian communes lasted for 100 years or more. Some did anyway. Well, his commune dissolved after only a few years. Because why, they say? Well, it attracted layabouts, shiftless people. There was no incentive to be productive. And this was trying it on a very small scale, not even on a national scale. So again, socialism has been tried. It's been found wanting. It fails. It's one of those things where we should just say, listen, it had its day. That's it. We should never be even thinking about implementing it again.
Never implementing it again. And the whole point is, too, that I think people miss that this was already recognized decades ago. They even enshrined it in law that communism is a subversive, or Communist Party is a subversive organization. In fact, it's still, at least it was as of a couple of years ago, still in Washington law that Communist Party is a subversive organization, so it was recognized back then. I think this gets us back to solutions now, bringing the truth into the sphere, moralizing, bringing morals back in is something we absolutely have to do, and especially at the local level. And we're seeing mama bears all over the country doing this. What's a couple more solutions that people can implement, and also where can they go to get more information in the last 2 minutes that we have left?
Okay. Well, for one thing, and I'm sure you're involved in this, but I think you have to remember, as they say, all politics is local. So start trying to change things on a local level. If you can seize control over your area where you have godly people prevailing, then you can really start to make some changes. You can control your local school board. And then what you have to do is you've got to scrutinize everything that the kids are exposed to. You have to understand, as someone once put it many years ago, that with our society today being so decadent, Matt, its elements must be viewed as guilty until proven innocent. Okay, so you always approach it with that mindset. And if you do that, then you'll be less likely to fall prey to the snares of the devil, which are all about. And then, like I said before, understand that truth exists, teach that to your kids, learn what the virtues are. Our faith, as the president of the Barna Group said some years ago, in the United States is a mile wide but an inch deep. That can't be the case. You know, Edmund Burke said, the Iro-English philosopher, "It is ordained in the eternal constitution of things that men of intemperate minds cannot be free. Their passions forge their fetters." If we continue to be men of intemperate minds, we will continue to descend into immorality and what attends that, tyranny. There's no doubt about it. We must right the moral ship.
We must right the moral ship. Selwyn Duke, thank you for everything you're doing in bringing clarity to these issues. God bless you and keep up the fight.
Oh, God bless you, Matt, and thanks for having me on. And have a great day.
I will. Selwyn Duke, The New American, thenewamerican.com, and also the Hill Observer, the American Conservative, World Net Daily, American Thinker, and many more. All right? You want to follow what he's doing. I actually still have that Is Jesus a Socialist, or Was Jesus a Socialist article. I've kept it for years. Fantastic, very clear teaching on Jesus Christ and that he was not a socialist, not even close. Now, I do want to mention a couple things coming up. First of all, coming up September 8th through the 9th, Dr. Emmanuel Ziga is going to be here for his annual leadership conference. Everybody's invited. If you are in the church, you are a leader. It's going to be September 8th and 9th, starting at 10 o'clock in the morning with a leadership breakfast. Again, everybody's invited. You got to register for that leadership breakfast. It's 10 o'clock on the morning of the 8th on Friday. And then the afternoon session will be at 2 o'clock. Evening session will be at 7. And that's the same for Saturday. Morning session at 10, afternoon session at 2, evening session at 7. It's going to be a great time of worship. We've got some great speakers coming in. And also, it's a time to come together and really, again, pray for the community, come together as one body. And Dr. Ziga always brings a great anointing, and there's a refreshing and a release when it comes to Spokane, Washington. So I look forward to seeing you all there. If you need more information, we're going to post it up here on On Fire's site and across all of the different social media platforms that we are on. And if you haven't done so yet, go to Telegram and join the On Fire channel there, as we put out a lot of information very quickly, especially during these times where people are saying, hey, what's going on in the world? You want to go there and get your information. And it really is the only place you need to go. A lot of people have many, that's fine. But if you want to just have one place you can scroll very quickly, that's the place. I also want to mention coming up very soon is the Healing Rooms Conference. And we're going to have that posted up as well. That's coming up here in September. But again, the main thing coming up right now, Dr. Emmanuel Ziga, September 8th and 9th at the Spokane Convention Center downtown. 3 sessions, 10, 2, and 7. You want to make sure you register for that leadership breakfast. Also want to bring up one last thing, and that is, if you have the opportunity, go to Rumble and subscribe. Help us get around the censorship. Like, share, and comment. If you're on Twitter, just hit retweet. Super easy, and it helps gets the word out. We are seeing many people that are saying, hey, I missed this, and it's because of censorship on some of these social media platforms. So get around it with Rumble. hit retweet, share the links, and make sure your family members are getting this as well. I mean, we cover virtually everything in the world in regards to geopolitics, but most importantly, we cover a kingdom mindset and how we should be approaching this time. That God is on the move, and as things get darker, things are also getting lighter on the other end, and as God pours out, the enemy's going to rage and react. But the fact that the enemy is raging and reacting means God is already on the move, and we've seen him on the move here in Spokane, Washington, with the whirlwind of his glory being released right now in our time. And he's called you to be here. He's called you to testify and witness to your friends and family who are lost and dying. This is what we need to do, all of us, everyone. This is Matt Shea. Thank you so much for being on Patriot Radio today. May God bless you all. And he is making this generation the greatest one. Awakening is here. Keep up the fight.